When a new source of taxation is found, it never means, in practice, that the old source is abandoned. It merely means that the politicians have found two ways of milking the taxpayer where they have won before. H.L. Mencken, American journalist, essayist, satirist, cultural critic, and scholar of American English. All right. Welcome back to another episode of the Liberty Dad podcast, a discussion on politics and culture. If you're tuning in live, thank you so much for tuning in so early. Man, we've got another week. What's going on? Let's dive right into it. We're going to talk. I got a video clip of Kamala Harris, the Democratic nominee for president. Right? She's there. She's there. I won't say guy, but not really guy. But she's their person, and she's talking about tax cuts. Who doesn't like hearing about tax cuts, right? Well, I thought we'd play the video, and we would just kind of walk through kind of like what tends to be ignored, which I think is pretty important. So let's play this clip real fast, and we'll talk about it. Let's see where we are. Okay, that's not playing the clip. How about that?
Under my plan, more than 100 million Americans will get a tax cut. And we will do this by restoring two tax cuts designed to help middle class and working Americans.
Okay, so first and foremost, we need to pay attention to what she's saying. She said, we're going to restore. Okay. You restore something that used to exist. Like that's how that works. So this isn't some new idea. This is an old one. So keep that in mind as we keep listening.
The earned income tax credit and the child tax credit.
Okay. Those both of those are tax credits. Okay. So what does that mean? It's not really a reduction in taxes, but it's more like a rebate. And for many Americans, what they do is they pay their taxes throughout the year. And then come April, they start filing their taxes. They go and they fill out other forms, or they go to the H&R Block or whoever, and they fill out all their information, put all like, here's all the money I've earned, here are all my credits, blah, 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 here's all the things. And then in some cases, they owe the government money. And in other cases, in many cases, the government owes you money because you have some tax credits. So what does that mean? That means they took your money all year long and you just get this nice little chunk back. So think about it for a moment. You didn't have that money after you earned it when you could have used it. The government is still they're still taking the money from you. And then it's more like a rebate. Like you just get it back if you happen to fall within the earned income tax credit or the child tax credit, which we're going to look at here in just a minute. So I'm going to point some things out, some interesting things. So let's keep listening. So I just want to make sure we're clear. It's very important sometimes to pay very close attention to the language and the words. I mean, we can get a little bit too nitpicky about that, right? But I think when it comes to political promises from candidates, we should absolutely pay very close attention to the words that they are using, what they mean, so that we can have a better conversation about whatever it is that they're promising. In this particular case, she's like, how about some tax credits, huh? Yeah, you'd like that, wouldn't you? Some earned income tax credit? How about a child tax credit? Go and get you a child. Let's see what happens, right? Like that's what she's making some promises on. Okay, cool.
Through which Millions of Americans with children got to keep more of their hard-earned income.
Okay. No, absolute. That is not true. You don't get to keep it. You get it back. That's important. If you got to keep it, then they never would have taken it in the first place. This is the this is why I think we need to start really rethinking tax day. And I was there once upon a time. I grew up and I watched my mom and dad. They would, my come tax season, my mom would have all the paperwork out on the table. We'd be trying to play and make noise, and she'd be like, "Get outside! I'm doing taxes." Like that was a stressful time for for mom and dad, mostly mom, because she sat there and she did all of it, and she pulled out all the paperwork, and then would yell at all of us kids because we were being too noisy, and she was trying to focus on taxes, and how much money they were going to get back. And then I grew up and I went out and I started doing my taxes and I was like, yeah, man, I'm getting like, you talk about it with your friends, right? You're like, yeah, this is how much money I'm getting back. And it never occurred to me, why were they taking it in the first place? They're just going to give it back. Why take it in the first place? I mean, that seems like a good, rather than it would be better if we had a system. I mean, it would be better for the people, not for the politicians. It would be better if we had a system where instead of taking your money all year long and then you having to do a whole bunch of work to see what you could get back. Because remember, my mom would spend like hours working on it, hours that she could have devoted to anything else, right? Spending more time with the children, going out and gardening, reading a book, whatever. But she had to spend her additional time to get her own money back. Right. And that's what Kamala Harris just said. She was like, you get to keep more of your hard earned money, but you're not really keeping it. You're getting it back after you spend some of your hard earned money to pay someone to do your taxes, or you spend your own time doing your taxes so that you can show the government, hey, I qualify for this tax credit or this tax credit. Right. That's what's going on. All right, let's continue listening.
We know this works.
Oh, do we?
And has a direct impact on so many issues, including child poverty.
Oh, well, that's very interesting. So this works and it reduces child poverty. That's interesting. We're going to look at this child tax credit in just a minute, and we're going to follow up on it works and child poverty because I got some questions. Well, let's continue listening real quick.
We know it works. So as president, I'll not only restore that tax cut, but
Again, the word restore.
Expand it. We will provide $6,000 in tax relief to families during the first year of a child's life. Now think what that means.
What does that mean? By the way, the first year of a child's life is literally one tax cycle because it's 1 year. It's just one tax cycle. That's it. That's what that means. Just want to point that out. Not sure if anybody else was paying attention.
Think what that means. That is a vital year of critical development of a child.
The development of that child is critical. And the government is they're gonna hook you up with some of your own money. If you vote for her. If you don't vote for her, you might not get some of your own money.
And the cost can really add up, especially for young parents who need to buy diapers and clothes and a car seat and so much else. And we will do this while reducing the deficit. Okay,
so we're not going to talk about the deficit right now. But I did want to point, because I wanted to talk about this child tax credit, because it sounds nice, right? You have a child for that whole 1 year, one tax cycle, exactly one tax cycle. Makes it sound like, anyway, one tax cycle, and you get to keep more of your income, and this works. Well, here's something you may not have realized. Let's pull this document up here. So this is the IRS's website. I'm sorry. I know. Like, who shows the IRS website at 7:42 in the morning? I do. That's who. Okay. All right. So we've got this website. Let me zoom in on it so you can see it a little bit better. All right. So let's zoom in here. There we go. All right. Child tax credit. Such a thing exists. It's already there. That's interesting. Let's see here. You can claim the child tax credit for each qualifying child who has a social security number valid that is valid for employment in the United States. Okay, so like if you have a child, basically you're eligible, right? Here's what it would be. This is for the 2023 tax year. If they're under 17, okay, that could be your son, daughter, stepchild, eligible foster child, brother, sister, stepbrother, stepsister, half brother, half sister, or descendant of one of these, for example, a grandchild, niece, or nephew. All right, provide no more than half of their own financial support during the year, have lived with you for more than half the year, be properly claimed as your dependent on your tax return. So don't forget your administrative stuff. Like you got to mark the boxes. Otherwise, they're not eligible if you don't mark the right boxes. Not file a joint return with their spouse for the tax year or file it only to claim a refund of withheld income tax or estimated tax paid. Have been a U.S. citizen, U.S. national, or U.S. resident alien. So pretty simple. Like most people with kids in this country are going to qualify, right? If you got a kid, this probably covers you. So we already have this child tax credit. That's interesting. So what is she going to restore? Well, CNN tells us. So here's their website article. Here's why everyone's talking about the child tax credit. All right. So let's go down and take a look here. It says Vice President Kamala Harris, the Democratic presidential nominee, has made boosting the child tax credit a central piece of her recently released four-part platform. Finally, we get one to lower cost for American families, which also included measures to make housing, groceries, and prescription drugs more affordable. She wants to, here it is, restore the 2021 American Rescue Plan Act's enhanced credit of $3,600 per child, which was only in effect for 1 year, as well as create a $6,000 credit for newborns. Now, I let's just go back. We're not going to play the video, but she just said, "We know this works, and I want to restore this." So my first question, if this was such a great idea, why isn't it permanent? Why did it own why it says right here. This was under the Biden administration. You might recall a certain VP in the Biden administration. Her name was Kamala Harris. So she's just basically borrowing an idea that President Biden, who I don't, do we even hear from him anymore? Like, does he even exist? I don't even think he's around. I think he's just disappeared. I don't know. But she, she wants to restore this, this credit that was applicable for literally 1 year. And the pretense is, well, it works. Okay. It keeps children out of poverty. Okay. Well, why was it only for 1 year? If it's so good and so important for child poverty, then why did the president who she served only use this for 1 year? Why didn't he implement or why, why didn't Congress and the president work together to implement this for more than 1 year? Maybe it's because they need something. They need a rabbit out of the hat when it comes time for us voters to vote for them. Hey, guess what? And they dangle a little tax credit like a carrot over our nose. And they tell us, if you vote for me, I'm going to give you this thing that we know is works and keeps you out of poverty. However, I'm only going to do it for a certain amount of time. That way we can use it again later. That's the unspoken part, right? We should be demanding and saying like, look, if you really believe it, if you believe that this, and I kind of actually do, I believe that when Americans can keep their own money, all of it, then they can do a whole lot more than what they can do when the government takes it and waste it on so many things. Right. So there's no question that if I go to a company and they say, we're going to pay you $100 per hour to do this task, you work for 10 hours, right? A day. Right. So now I'm going to make $1,000 a day. But if I have to give 30% of that to the government, well, that gives me like $600, just over $600. Well, of course I can do more with 1,000 than I can 600. So why are they taking it in the first place? What they ought do, if they really want to make a serious campaign promise, and I'm not talking about just Harris, I'm talking about anybody. Anybody should say, look, I'm going to cut your taxes. We're going to take it off we're not even going to take it in the first place. We're not offering you rebates. We're not going to take it in the first place because it was yours. And if we're just going to give it back to you, we might as well. There's no reason to not let you keep it in the first place so that you can use it when you made it. How many, if you're an American, well, if you're anybody really, if you're watching this show, you pay taxes. When was the last time? I mean, how many of you look forward to payday? And we don't need to discuss whether you should or not. Just think about it. Do you look forward to payday? Are you like, man, I can't wait till payday. I can buy this new thing I've been I've been hoping to buy. Or in maybe some cases, hey, I can't wait till payday because man, this bill, it's got me up against the wall right now. Had an unexpected, my HVAC went out. Had an unexpected expense. I can't wait till payday to help out. Right. Well, imagine what it would be like if you could wait, if you were like, I can't wait till payday and you're getting, some percentage more of your money, the money that you earned already. Right. But instead, the government's got you in this game where you wait for an entire year and hoping that you can get a really big fat check. But you've had to suffer and deal with the limited expenses all year long. And then on the campaign trail, they're going to come out and dangle a tax credit and say, well, this is important. Keeps children out of poverty. But the tax credit doesn't come until the end of the year. So all year long, your child got to be in poverty, according to her own words, right? Your child got to be in poverty, but man, come the 15th of April, you're going to get a big fat check. And you know what? Your child won't be in poverty anymore, at least for that month. I mean, that's kind of how I'm hearing this. Right? Like, and I think this is the kind of thing that we need to really pay attention to when it comes to politicians. We can't hold their feet to the fire if we don't, pay attention to what they're saying and, understand the world around us. So when you hear people boast about this child tax credit and how maybe it's, it works, ask them like, okay, well, if it's so great, why don't we just give them, why don't we stop taking money from the people in the first place so they don't have to worry about a credit, basically a rebate later that's presented as if it's going to stop child poverty when they get a nice big fat paycheck effectively once a year. Like, okay, if it's so great for poverty, well, what about, that whole prior year, all of 2023, 2024, right? Well, actually, it'll be 2024, but the website we were looking at was for 2023. They'll update it eventually here. So, like, that's the conversation we need to start having and say, nah, that ain't good enough. We want more. How's that commercial go? It's my money. I want it now. Basically. All right. What else we got? Speaking of fire, there is a libertarian who is under fire working with an organization called Fire because of a selfie, a mere selfie. Got a whole lawsuit going on over a selfie. So let's pull that up here. Let's see where we go. This is from Fire, which is, what is their name? Give me a second. I will tell you what this stands for. Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression. So let's check this out. pull it right back up on the screen here. I think we can. There we go. Boom. All right. So, fire lawsuit, North Carolina. Let me make this a little bit bigger so that you can read it. Well, it's pretty big, but we can make it more bigger. There we go. All right. Lawsuit, North Carolina woman challenges state's unconstitutional ballot selfie ban. I know this person, Susan Hogarth. If you're in the libertarian community, you know who this person is. All right. Fire is suing members of the North Carolina State Board of Elections to overturn multiple, this is crazy, unconstitutional laws banning photos of official ballots or, quote, ballot selfies. Under the First Amendment, the government can't restrict political speech unless it has a compelling reason, and North Carolina doesn't have one. Despite being a crime in 14 states, Fire's research shows 1 in 10 Americans, more than 20 million Americans nationwide, say they've taken a ballot selfie. Picture may be worth 1,000 words, but in North Carolina, taking that picture could cost you thousands of dollars in fines and jail time. On March 5th, Susan Hogarth voted in the North Carolina Libertarian Party primary and took a selfie with her completed ballot. For good measure, Susan took the picture in front of a sign saying ballot photos were not allowed in the voting booth. Then she posted the image to X. Let's see if we can't pull that picture up. I like it. Let's see. Let's see. Can we do this? Open image. Let me do it this way. There we go. That's not as zoom out. So here's where it says right up there. Photos, texting, videos, email, phone calls, not permitted, verboten. Look at that. And then she's like, hey, here's me voting in the primary. And they said, then what happened? With a caption endorsing the candidate she voted for and declaring, quote, laws against ballot selfie are bullshit. Totally agree. A few weeks later, Susan received a letter from the North Carolina State Board of Elections telling her she committed a crime and demanding she take the post down. That's insane. They spent the time to send her a letter and say, hey, you need to take this down from social media. That's not allowed. That's what they spent their time on, not making sure that, I don't know, the elections were all fair, that they were counted properly, not that stuff, not ensuring that the public had the proper information for those wonks out there that want to go and maybe look up all the numbers and check things out. Like that wasn't their focus. They stopped all that stuff that they're supposed to be doing so that they could send somebody a letter and say, hey, you can't do that. You can't take a picture of your ballot that you filled out expressing who you support, right? The board informed her that taking her ballot selfie was a misdemeanor under a North Carolina law stating, quote, no person shall photograph, videotape, or otherwise record the image of a voted official ballot, end quote. That statute is just one of several that criminalize taking and sharing ballot selfies in the state. These restrictions go beyond just photographing yourself in the voting booth. They extend to posing with absentee ballots in the comfort of your own home. Is that insane or what? Like if you have an absentee ballot and you take a picture of it, and then the government's like, whoa, you can't be doing that. That's our ballot. No, it's my ballot. You know how I know? Because I paid for it with my tax money. Because the government doesn't have any money unless they get taxes. That's the only money they got is if they take money from taxes. That means it's everything that the government has is technically the citizens. And citizens, when they're expressing their right on and it doesn't matter. I would support this if you were voting for Kamala Harris. Okay. I would absolutely support fighting back because it is your right to vote for whomever you want. It's your right to tell people or not tell people, right? I've got friends, they will not discuss who they vote for. I'm not even sure if they vote. Like, fine. And other friends, they're happy to, right? They'll even take a selfie. I've taken a selfie before and I'm like, hey, look, here's who I voted for. And I get it. I understand what they're trying to do. They're like, well, we don't want, we want to reduce the incentive for people that might be getting paid. And you might say, well, that doesn't happen. No, so I mentored, I was trying to decide really quickly if I want to tell the story. I'm going to. So I mentored a kid and a long time ago, and he told me that some of his past mentors were like super duper Republican. Okay, cool. No big deal. Whatever. And he said one of them actually tried to, and I can't remember which election this was, but he was like, tried to say, like, I'll pay you to vote for this candidate. And I was like, well, for starters, that's illegal. So do not do that just in case. Now, whether it should be illegal or not is an entirely different conversation. But the fact of the matter is, if you don't know that it's illegal, now you do. Don't do that because that's not a fight you want. Now, in this case, a ballot selfie, especially when you got the backing of an organization that's going to help fight this for you on your behalf, then yeah, you should totally fight this. Like we should totally there are some things you should stand up for, and your right to tell people who you voted for is one of them. Now, if you want to have that fight about getting paid for it, like fine. But what this is, and I kind of cringe because I was like, dude, like that's not really what a mentor should be doing. A mentor isn't there to try to make sure your politics are in line. Like a mentor is like to try to help you prepare yourself for the world that's ahead of you, right? Like I'm basically a father figure. And, that doesn't mean that I'm paying your mom to to vote in a particular way. And so that's what they'll tell you the law is for. They'll say, well, we want to stop that kind of stuff. Well, okay, and I get it. How do you like if you take a selfie, that could be to prove that you voted for who you were asked to vote for or you were paid to vote for. So I totally get it. But at the end of the day, I look at it and I say the value of free speech is way more important than if somebody bribes you to pay for, to vote for a particular candidate, which they can do anyway, right? Like, people, I'm sure that somebody can figure out some way, right? Like here, just off the top of my head. And I literally just thought of this while I'm sitting here yapping, running my mouth. I came up with that, how it works. You do an absentee ballot in the comfort of your own home. So the person comes over, they watch you fill it out, right? They watch you seal it up and drop it in the mail. Or you give it to them and they go drop it in the mail. And before they leave, they hand you $25. There you go, right? So you can't even stop it anyway. Now, I'm not telling you to do that, okay? So if you go out and do that, it's against Liberty Dad's advice. I advise you to not break this particular law. Now, the ballot selfie law, I'm not advising you to break any laws because I don't think that's the kind of trouble that I want. But I'm just saying, if you do and you end up on somebody's website where some organization is fighting on your behalf, I'll probably talk highly about it. Okay. Let's put it that way. So ultimately, for me, freedom of speech reigns supreme. And if you want to take a picture of for whatever reason, doesn't matter. Maybe you're just bored and you're like, I need more content. I need some clickbait. Fine. I don't care. Doesn't matter. The reason is not relevant to me. What's important is that you are able to take a picture of you doing, what you might call your civic duty. And just because you're proud of your vote, period. Maybe you're happy, you're excited to vote for Harris and Walz. Okay, then fine. Take a picture of you voting for them. Maybe it's somebody local. You just want to say, like, look, I supported you, and here's me supporting this person, and it's a local candidate. Doesn't matter. I don't care. I do care that you have the right to do it. And so good on Susan for fighting back. Good on Fire for picking up the case. And I'll be looking forward to seeing them win. Hopefully they do. All right. So that's that. Let's take a little bit of an intermission here real quick, and then we'll be back and we will talk about the Second Amendment that's coming up on Florida's ballot.
This is the most important election to vote third party. This is our chance, Florida, to give America someone you can trust in the United States Senate. Let's give the U.S. Senate a libertarian from Florida with love. I'm Fina Benoit, and I approve this message.
But I know I'll be a law someday, at least I hope and pray that I will. But today I am still just a bill.
All right. So before we jump into the bill review, let's take a look at some of the comments and let's see what we've got here. We don't want to miss out anybody in their comments. So what do we got here? Joe Hanush says, as a candidate for Florida State House, I favor repealing the First Amendment infringement law here in Florida. Presumably that specifically means the ballot law. So I presume it's illegal here in Florida. To be honest with you, I didn't look it up because I don't care. I'll take a picture of what of me when I want at my leisure, period. Especially when it comes to voting. Now I did vote just recently and I didn't take a picture just because I didn't really care at the moment, but had I wanted to, I would have. And I have before. There's pictures of me with my ballot where I've shown who I voted for. And do it again, like that meme says. Let's see. Let's see here. What do we got? Ballot selfie, that Liberty lady. All right. So, if maybe, what? Here, I tell you what. I'm going to try to remember this. Okay. I'm going to put it in my calendar to remember this. Here's what I'm going to do. On November 4th, was that when we're voting? Or is it, let me look at the calendar here real quick. Which day specifically? Yeah, November 4th. Yeah, it'll be November 4th. So November 4th, when we go to vote, when we go to the poll, it's a Monday. So on Tuesday, I will post as many ballot selfies as I can get a hold of from the general election. That's what we're gonna do. So I'm gonna put it in my calendar so that I remember, and that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna help push back. So if you're brave and you're willing, now remember, if you tag me on Twitter and you say, hey, here's my ballot selfie, then I will post. I will present it. Now just know, I'm a wildly popular podcast. So if you tag me, I'm posting it, you may get a call from the government. So, I cannot be held accountable for that. So don't tag me if you don't want your picture blasted all over America. Okay, folks? But I'm going to do that because I will take a ballot selfie myself come November. We're going to do this. That's going to be the Liberty Dad. We'll come up with some cool name for it. Or if somebody comes up with a name, let me know. But that's what we're going to do. Oh, is it Tuesday the 5th? Okay. So looks like Mr. Hanush has corrected me. Correction noted. Election day is Tuesday, November 5th. So I should have known that, but hey, that's where we are. All right. So let's see what we've got here with these amendments. So let's go ahead and take a look over here. We got Ballotpedia pulled up here, and we're going to take a look. Boom, there we are. So last week, it was on Tuesday. Monday, I had a little bit of a snafu. So last week, on Tuesday, I went over the first of the 6 amendments that will be on the Florida ballot. Today, I'm going to go over Amendment 2. It's actually relatively simple and straightforward. So here's the language that it uses. It basically establishes a state constitutional right to hunt and fish. So let's take a look over here. Oops, let me go back to the top. So here's where we are. Florida Amendment 2, right to hunt and fish. Amendment 2024. A yes vote supports establishing a constitutional right to hunt and fish in Florida. A no vote opposes establishing a constitutional right to hunt and fish. Now, personally, I think that it's a little bizarre that we're having a conversation where it's like, should we or should we not vote for a constitutional right to hunt and fish? That seems a bit bizarre to me. Because we already have the Second Amendment right, which explicitly was for self-defense, more explicitly, self-defense against a tyrannical government. However, it would presumably also kind of like as an added bonus, but not its primary purpose, be there so that to say like, yes, you could go hunting as well, or you could shoot a rogue animal on your property, right? So it seems to me that even though the Second Amendment was explicitly about defending yourself against a tyrannical government, that it kind of implies that, oh yeah, If you need to shoot an animal for food, you can totally do that too, especially if it's like a wild animal, like not somebody's property. So it's a little weird to me that we're even having this conversation, but here we are. So let's deal with it as is. All right. So it does require a supermajority, so 60%. And what would it do? The ballot measure would provide a state constitutional right to hunt and fish and declare that hunting and fishing are the preferred means for responsibly managing and controlling fish and wildlife and shall be preserved forever as a public right. That's really weird language again, like preserved forever. Like, okay, I guess you could just go and undo it and say it's no longer preserved forever. So it's a little bit weird that you're saying it because once you put it in there as a right, then it's considered a right. And that's that. I don't understand why you got to have this additional preserved forever language, but hey, whatever. So let's take a look. So I want to point out here, it says the amendment would not limit the Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission constitutional powers under Article 4, Section 9. So let's take a look at what it says there. So here it is, Section 9, Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission. And it's a little long, but we'll read it. We'll read some of it. There shall be a Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission composed of 7 members appointed by the governor, subject to confirmation by the Senate for staggered terms of 5 years. The commission shall exercise the regulatory and executive powers of the state with respect to wild animal life and freshwater aquatic life, and shall exercise regulatory and executive powers of the state with respect to marine life, except that all license fees for taking wild animal life, freshwater aquatic life, and marine life, and penalties for violating regulations of the commission shall be prescribed by general law. So it seems to me that they're going to that you still have to get a license. Right? That's kind of how I'm reading this. And if we look a little further here, we can look at some of the ballot language, like what you can expect to see when you go to the ballot. So let's see here. Here is the ballot title. I'll cut over to that real quick. And so what this says here is the ballot title is as follows: Right to Fish and Hunt, proposing an amendment to the state constitution to preserve forever fishing and hunting, including by the use of traditional methods, as a public right. And I don't understand this public right. Individuals have rights. The public, there's no such thing as a public right. It's just a made up term. Like an individual has a right, right? And a right is something that that I can exercise without any imposition on somebody else. So in other words, if you say, "Well, Dale, you have the right to do a podcast," that is that like freedom of speech. Yes, I have the right to do a podcast, but that doesn't mean that you have to listen to me. That doesn't mean that you have to fund it in any way. That just means like I can do it. You can't stop me, but I cannot impose upon you to assist in any way. As a public right and preferred means of responsibly managing and controlling fish and wildlife, specifies that the amendment does not limit the authority granted to the Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission under Section 9 of Article 4 of the state constitution. So that's what you're going to see on your ballot if you're voting here in Florida. And so ultimately, I do support this, but kind of like hesitantly, because I don't quite understand what's going to be different for the individual. So really quickly, let's take a look over here, and this is going to be the change to the Constitution. And so this is what it will say. So they're going to add section 28 to our Constitution that basically says what I just read: fishing, hunting, and the taking of fish and wildlife. Fishing, hunting, and the taking of fish and wildlife, including by the use of traditional methods, shall be preserved forever as a public right. So again, language that I'm a little uncomfortable with here, just because I'm not entirely certain where they're trying to go or the impact that it's going to have. And preferred means of responsibly managing and controlling fish and wildlife. This section does not limit the authority granted to the Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission under Section 9 of Article 4. So basically, same language, basically says, hey, it's a public right, whatever that exactly means. I don't believe that there's such thing as a public right. It just doesn't exist. Individuals have rights, and that means just it's just like it doesn't make sense to me. So I don't really understand. What I suspect is that this may, um, you know, they're probably passing something. So there's a couple things that could be happening. Number one, they could be passing something that has very little effect, and they get to say, "Hey, look what we did. We passed this," right? And then if I'm right, and it doesn't really impact the individual so much, then they get to claim a win while actually having delivered nothing. And this is part of my problem when you say like public and it's still subject to, this organization that, gives out licensing and all this other stuff. So it sounds to me like business as usual. The only thing is they're claiming, those who are in favor of this are claiming, well, people are trying to take away your rights. This helps preserve them. Okay, well, if the only way that people can take away our rights is to pass laws that says you no longer can do this. So we just simply reject those laws. We don't really need to pass an amendment. In my opinion, we don't really need to pass an amendment that really does nothing other than makes it a little bit harder to pass this other law that some other group might be trying to pass. Right. So there's a lot of presumption here. Like somebody might come along and they might propose this legislation and it might pass. So, in order to stop all that, we're going to add this language into the Constitution that doesn't really impact the individual so much, especially if you still have to get a license. Like, okay, it's your right, but you have to have a license. Um, the other thing I would say about it is it could be a concern because it could lay the foundation or further the idea that our rights should be restricted by permits. So if they say, well, this is a public right, but you still have to have a license for it, well, then what other rights might we have that we would need a license for? And if they say, well, it's a public right and it's a made up thing, like I keep saying, not an individual right, then that means that they have full control over how this public right is managed and what limits there are, if any, on it. You see where I'm going with this? Like with individual rights, we understand what that means. I have a right, and like you can't take it away without, say, due process. But a public right, and maybe there's something in law that I'm not familiar with that kind of defines it more like an individual right. But just basically reading off the words flat out, just looking at the words at face value, I look at it and I say, well, that's a made up term, which means administrating it is is at your leisure, right? So you don't have to. In other words, if you have to take away, if you have to have due process to take away an individual right, but a public right is not viewed that way, then you don't have to necessarily have due process to take it away, right? This is my concern with it because I don't really know what they mean by public right because it is not a term that I recognize. And then it does, in that language there, and let's go back to it real quick here. Where do we go here? This one. So let's go back to it real quick here. And so when it says preferred means of responsibly managing and controlling fish and wildlife, that sounds very much like laying the foundation for commercial fishing and hunting. And so maybe this will be applicable mostly to commercial fishing and hunting and not so much the individual. And because the Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission is still in control, then they just simply get to control more who comes in. Right. And so again, it sounds like maybe nothing is actually happening. They just get to say we got to win because it sounds good. So, because of all that, I support it and I'm going to vote yes. And I would encourage others to vote yes, but do so cautiously because it could be nothing and of no benefit to anybody, or it could lay some future legal foundations that we don't like. And that's always hard to gauge. Like, I don't know, you know. The interesting thing about laws is that you don't necessarily know what some clever lawyer is going to argue about in 5 years. We can speculate sometimes, but we can't always be sure. Especially what'll happen is, this might pass and then some other things might pass. And then the clever lawyer might come and say, well, because all these things have passed, now I think there's an argument to be made that this should happen and that whatever this should happen ends up being could be good, could be bad, it could be whatever. Right. So it's hard to speculate. So for me, I support this. I do because in my mind, I look at it and I say, number one, we should always, at least in the spirit of the law, we should consider that hunting and fishing is a natural right. And if it's public land or, land that is not privately owned, then Americans should be able to go and hunt. Now, if it's public land that's owned by the government, then I'm a little bit more tolerant of them putting limitations on it. In the same way that if I personally owned thousands of acres and I said, all right, I'm going to let hunters go on here and you just pay me money. And then I'm going to ensure that there's always animals for you to hunt. So therefore, I'm going to make sure that I'm not going to allow hunters to come and just wipe out every animal because that's not good for business. So I've got to do a little conservation there and ensuring that there are, plenty of deer, rabbit, whatever. And I don't have a problem if the government currently is controlling it. I don't want to say I don't have a problem. I tolerate it. I tolerate if the government is under current control of public land and they do likewise. That I can accept that. But I think ultimately the better position for society would be that the government doesn't own any land and that it's all owned by private individuals. And they make the determination and say, hey, I'm going to ensure that there are plenty of rabbits here for you to hunt. In the same way that up in the Midwest, when I used to go fishing at different small lakes that were privately owned, and they would intentionally stock the lake. Like they made sure that there were fish there for people to come and catch. So I think the same thing could work with hunting as well. And so ideally that would be the best situation. So support this bill, support this amendment because I think it's a good one. Well, I, I think it has some merit. Let's put it that way. I don't want to say it's a good one. There's a couple questions about it. All right. So let's see. What do we got here in the comments? Let's take a look. Liberty Dad, when will you be posting the voter guide for candidates and amendments from LPDC? So this is unrelated to the podcast, but it's still important. So Libertarian Party of Duval County, they're going to put out, we've actually talked, the officers have talked, and we're going to put out a voter guide. And we will be doing that probably in the next week or so. Roughly, we're not rushing necessarily, because we were getting past the primary. We want to try to figure out who's on the ballot, but I don't think it really much matters because, I don't believe any of the libertarians were bumped from the primaries. So, but just kind of taking things one step at a time, I guess. So that'll be coming out in a week or two. So look forward to that. Let's see. Again, from that Liberty lady, nature right that I shouldn't need a license for, and the government should own zero land. Agree. Absolutely. And then Mr. Hanush says, no, yes, 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 no, yes. So if you just want to skip all my episodes on all the amendments, you can just go with what he said. So number 1 would be no, and then 2, 3, and 4 would be yes, and then 5 is a no, and 6 is yes. So if you just want to skip watching my show on Mondays, which why would you do that? That's crazy talk, right? So that's where he is. And you can follow whomever you like. But here, I tell you what, go to the show notes in the episode and click on the link and just read them for yourself. You might disagree with me. You might say, DL, you've totally got this all backwards. And that's fine. Like I would prefer ultimately, if you read it on your own and made your own decision, than just listening to me. But as a service to everyone else, I am giving you my thoughts, which may or may not influence you. At any rate, that's my show for today. I appreciate you watching and tuning in so early in the morning. Be sure to catch me Monday through Friday, 7:30 a.m. for Eastern Time for an informed discussion on politics and culture. Make sure you're also subscribed to my YouTube channel, or if you prefer, my Rumble channel. You can go to youtube.libertydad.com. You can go to rumble.libertydad.com. While you are there, please let me know how I'm doing by leaving me a comment. Last but not least, if you're a champion of liberty, your business is people and your product is liberty. I want you to have a great week. Catch you next time. But for now, I'm out.